Before we begin, a lot of this channel talks about movies in a way that's about framing and intent, especially in writing. Also, you know, if I pissed you off on Twitter, that I am a failed writer. And you know this because I wrote it in my bio. Well done, Pat. You've really got me there. I'm so ashamed I wrote this myself. Do you think I was forced to put it in there? Anyway, writing is important to me. And so is writers getting what they deserve, and more importantly, so they can live. The Writers Guild of America have been striking since May, and it's been going for roughly 10 to 12 weeks. Very shortly before SAG-AFTRA joined, there was a leak in Deadline about a Hollywood exec talking about how they're literally just planning to starve these people out, and, you know, basically so they can go back to the table and be forced into a deal that is more suitable to the Hollywood executives. Potentially making them homeless is a necessary evil to these bastards. So executives are sitting pretty plainly on this matter. They need our support. Below is a link to the Entertainment Community Fund and a snack list. This will help writers and actors stay financially secure enough as they battle these bastards at the picket. If you're unable to donate, which is completely understandable, feel free to try to share these links. Anything you can do to contribute to help these people in this situation. Anyway, on with the video. There's been a recent and encroaching trend in Hollywood that seems to have taken people's notice. Biopics about brands. First one to come out of these is Air, the Randian triumph about the branding for Air Jordans, which was led by marketing executives, which the movie focused on. We also have movies about BlackBerry and Tetris. One of these is actually directed by the guys who made The Founder, which is about the formation of McDonald's as a franchise. That film is actually great, and I'm actually looking forward to Tetris because that story sounds pretty cool. So I would recommend checking out The Founder if you haven't seen it. It's one of Michael Keaton's best performances, personally. Why this is happening, I'm not really sure, but that's not the focus of this video in particular. I'm actually focusing on another product-based biopic. This one dropped on Hulu in the United States and Disney Plus everywhere else last month. It's about the origin of Flamin' Hot Cheetos. Flamin' Hot looks at the hotshot marketing executive Richard Montañez, the inventor of the recipe that burns your tongue in a nice little puff thing. They're not really that popular over here, so I'm not really... I don't think I've ever actually... No, I had Flamin' Hot Cheetos when I was in America. Why am I talking about this in the video? It looks at his origins as a Mexican immigrant who grew up in a incorporated migrant camp in California picking grapes. We see him struggle to make ends meet until he manages to get a job as a janitor within Frito-Lay. In this job, he eventually rises up thanks to his genius yet simple invention: putting chili on a Cheeto. The film does a fine job, if a bit by the basics, in telling the story. It has a very charming spirit, likable cast, and a lot of heart. There's just one teeny tiny problem that people may bring up about it. He may not have actually invented the Flamin' Hot Cheetos. I want to examine this in terms of what it says about biopics and what motivates their production, but I also want to give both sides of this story. I've gone through several different sources. I'll link them below just to piece together Montañez's part of this. But for the opposite side, I've looked at the LA Times article which broke the story. Like, if they're lying, they put a lot of homework into this. Okay, cool, let's get started. I'm just going to skip directly to him being hired for Frito-Lay's because nothing else is really that disputed about. There is discrepancies in terms of when he dropped out of school, but the important thing is he was a dropout. Considering how long ago this was, I can understand if he doesn't have a perfect photographic memory of when exactly he stopped going to school. Also, it's not really that important for the story. After struggling with various odd jobs, Montañez landed in their factory at Rancho Cucamonga in 1976 when he was 18 years old as a maintenance worker. With no high school diploma, he pushed forward with his own PhD, being poor, hungry, and determined. The idea for the famously spicy snack came when one of the machines that kind of blew the orange puff onto the Cheetos malfunctioned, and the Cheetos were left barren, useless, and ashamed. Bringing the bland boys home, he came up with a concept. Let's put chili on these. He was inspired by this by looking vendors creating what was called an elote, a corn on the cob with cheese, butter, lime, and salsa. Actually, shit, that sounds great. I should try it sometime. He let his friends, family, and neighbors try out this recipe, and they loved it. They encouraged him to pitch it to Frito-Lay. He decided to do this by reaching out to Frito-Lay's then CEO, Roger Enrico. Enrico had actually inspired him to push himself like he was a CEO after a kind of routine motivational video went out to the workers, and it actually inspired him by his words saying to act like a CEO. You know, most people just kind of push that past and, you know, just watch it because it's kind of a dumb requirement for work, but he actually took these words of his boss to heart. He reached out to Enrico's executive assistant, Patty Ruoff, who he managed to convince to put him onto the phone to Enrico. He was intrigued by the pitch and asked Montañez to push a presentation on in 2 weeks when he was visiting Rancho Cucamonga. With his first ever tie, his own bag design of Flamin' Hot Cheetos, and a boatload of books that he was using to train himself for this, he went into the presentation with tons of executives. This was also attended by his mentor and later Frito-Lay CEO Al Carey. The presentation was going well until one of the executives asked, "How much market share are we looking at this?" Montañez panicked and, not really sure what the term actually meant, he thought about the actual grocery aisles where all the snacks were put on. So he just went,
This much market share.
Honestly, that anecdote is great. It's actually really cute. And the idea was a success. Flamin' Hot Cheetos hit the market and it became one of the most successful products of PepsiCo, Frito-Lay's parent company. Montañez flew up the corporate ladder because of his multi-million-dollar idea. He ended up becoming vice president of multicultural sales and community promotions of PepsiCo. He continued to push for Flaming Hot and Hispanic-inspired brandings all over PepsiCo, as well as starting grants for kids who grew up in his situation to help them out. He has since led with the story and has gone to multiple speaking engagements, including writing 2 memoirs. So that's one side. What's the other? So there's a couple of discrepancies in Richard's story. One of the things is him being a maintenance worker, and this is something that the film focuses on. They essentially say he was a janitor up to his pitch to Frito-Lay's about the Flamin' Hot Cheetos. However, he actually got a promotion to machine operator in 1977, a year after he joined as a maintenance worker. And then he got promoted to chief machine operator in 1993. You could probably just put this down to, shit of memory, or the fact that he embellished it a little bit because the line "janitor invents Flamin' Hot Cheetos" is just a bit snappier to lead with. It's pretty harmless overall. In terms of the actual story about it, one of the beats, let's say, Roger Enrico. So he made a phone call to Roger Enrico. He was inspired by the video Enrico put out as CEO of Frito-Lay's. So Enrico is a huge part of his inspiration for the Flamin' Hot Cheeto product. So Roger Enrico didn't become CEO of Frito-Lay's until 1991. They had already not only been starting developing of it in 1989, but had put it into certain test markets by 1990. So they already had Flamin' Hot Cheetos in limited markets by 1990. It didn't really go out to the rest of the country until early 1992. So I guess the question remains, if he didn't invent Flamin' Hot Cheetos, who did? You're ready for the bombshell of your life. A fucking marketing committee. If you saw my water bottle in the shot, no, you didn't. Lynn Greenfeld was fresh out of her MBA program when she got the project to try to create the spicy snack to help out PepsiCo's competition. TLDR, there was a massive snack war in the 80s that PepsiCo were obviously heavily involved in. She had long since left Frito-Lay's and was shocked to find out that Montañez was taking credit for this snack her and her team had developed. Greenfeld had done research in places like Houston, Detroit, and Chicago, which had in these mini marts all of these kind of spicy snacks readily available. This makes sense with the increased visibility and demographics of Latino communities within these cities and something like a massive corporation picking this up and wanting to make a quick buck out of it. They had come up with the packaging as well as the flavoring. So this has been corroborated by Greenfeld's team, the manager who put her on this position, Frito-Lay's own statement on the matter. Oh, we'll get back to them. Flaming Hot being trademarked in 1990, a year before Enrico became CEO of Frito-Lay's. A lot of promotional material at the time. Look, I would just read the LA Times article because they go down a lot of sources in terms of it. It's highly recommended. I'm just kind of relaying what they're saying. Okay, so that part of the story is pretty shaky. What about the pitch meeting? Nobody who was asked could recall this. One even said, if this had happened, people would have been talking about it. And yeah, a charismatic grunt worker randomly ringing up the CEO of a company with this idea for a spicy snack, going into his meeting and saying this much market share, flapping his hands out, causing the CEO and other executives to kind of lightheartedly jab at that and, mimic it themselves. Water cooler talk has been made for less. They asked about 20 executives who had been in product development around that time, a lot of whom are named in the article, if they could recall the story, and none of them could. Frito-Lay said in a statement to the Times that they have no record of Richard Montañez working on the Flaming Hot Cheeto product. And the thing is, Montañez's career trajectory does match the story he tells, just without pizzazz of, calling up the CEO and creating the original Flamin' Hot idea. In 93, he pitched the idea of Flamin' Hot popcorn, which had hit the market the year after. He had also come up with a bunch of other stuff for the Hispanic market. Like, he did rise up the corporate ladder, became marketing exec. All of that is true. Just this detail about the Flamin' Hot Cheetos and him creating it seems to be shaky. And there are people who corroborate his story. Patty Ruoff insists that Richard Montañez did call and she did push him through to Roger Enrico. And to this day, and in the article itself. So that brings up the question of how the timeline makes sense, but the next person I'm going to talk about may have a clue to that. Al Carey is the only executive who backs up Montañez's side of the story and says that the marketing meeting actually happened. Carey, given his closeness to Montañez, interestingly enough, doesn't actually appear in the movie. A character called Clarence C. Baker, who is based on a real life person, but who died and his name is changed in the film, kind of takes on the mentor role for Montañez, but he's not really an executive, he's a worker on the machines. But that happens a lot. It's, you know, it's composite characters. They put two people who serve roughly the same function in a story together in order to save up on, you know, time and casting and pacing and stuff like that. So, fine. And again, the LA Times did interview the guy, and it's kind of funny that they do kind of a back and forth pushback on Carey's claims. One of the biggest ones is he says that there must have been two Flamin' Hot products being developed at around the same time. So that would have been Greenfeld's team and Montañez's pitch. The one that eventually made it to the national market was the one that used Montañez's flavoring. The idea of a similar product to the point where they both have the same name is a bit convenient, but it seems to be the one that they're kind of running for, because they do mention this briefly in the film. It is then pointed out that they actually do have the company who created the flavoring called McCormick, who developed it in 1989. Frito-Lay stand that this is the original flavoring that they have used for Flamin' Hot Cheetos since. When this was pointed out to Carey, he said, well, it's possible they both invented the same flavorings. About Frito-Lay's statement, while the LA Times article shows that they pretty hardly go down on the idea that Richard Montañez did not create Flamin' Hot Cheetos, they have somewhat walked this back in future statements, possibly to save face. Sarah Ida Gonzalez is a host of an NPR podcast called Planet Money. She mentioned the LA Times article and that she had reached out to Frito-Lay's for further comment on the situation. Their statement to her says that it's a bit more nuanced. They back up Carey's claim that there was two teams who were working on Flamin' Hot Cheetos separately. They're insisting that Montañez just didn't come up with it alone. They never specifically say Montañez created Flamin' Hot Cheetos, just that he created other Flamin' Hot products, though two employees at the time do claim that Montañez was the one who was, you know, the inventor of the Flamin' Hot Cheetos. If you watch through this video again, just take a shot every time I say Flamin' Hot Cheetos. You'll be snookered by the first 2 minutes. They also reiterate a version of the pitch meeting where Roger Enrico wasn't present. I mean, for Frito-Lay, they trucked this guy out for so many key conferences, and he's put a lot of time into the company. And they, in the LA Times article, they did seem to completely throw him under the bus on this. So, like, if he stopped being their inspo baby, it could look pretty bad for them. It should be noted here that Richard started making the claim that he was the inventor of Flamin' Hot Cheetos roughly around the mid-2000s-esque, when this kind of became a meme and people are doing the kind of cool challenges and stuff like that. So that's something to consider on this. Like, it's possible he just didn't have the resources or the push to tell people this. But again, also the idea that there was two teams at the same time creating the product with the same name, again, it's a bit convenient. You also consider the fact that Flamin' Hot Cheetos was trademarked by Frito-Lay's in 1990, which was a year before Roger Enrico became CEO of Frito-Lay's. It doesn't add up a lot, but again, Frito-Lay's was a huge company and they did have, you know, branches and plants that worked separately with no real communication between each other. It is possible that these two independent teams created a very similar or almost the same product at around the same time. Roger Enrico not being at the team, however, doesn't really account for the phone call part. Why don't I ask Roger Enrico? He cleared us up very easily. I'm sure he's happy to... Oh. Frito-Lay's released a statement later trying to patch up the relationship with Montañez and the Latino community by saying that the Times misrepresented them. So they don't contradict the article at all and never reached out to the LA Times for corrections on their story. Montañez to this day maintains that he invented the Flamin' Hot Cheetos. He doesn't dispute Greenfeld's points, but he said once that the product had begun development, they pushed him out due to his low worker status at the time. The whole thing just seems like a headache for Frito-Lay's that won't go away, really. When Greenfeld read the story in 2018, she reached out to Frito-Lay's, which caused an internal investigation. Kerry Montagnier retired in 2019. While the timing of this is pretty convenient, it seems to be that Montagnier wants to continue the motivational speaker route as well as focus more in on film. Kerry encouraged this in case his position in Frito-Lay's created a conflict of interest. Also, lad worked there for about 40 years and pretty much climbed the corporate ladder to as high as, he could want to go. Not really sure what else he could do there. I guess push for CEO, but that may not have been in his interest at the time. Frito-Lay's investigation came back inconclusive, which, kind of adds up to the shitfire this whole thing has led into. To be clear, don't know who's telling the truth here. Is it possible this man was pushed out of his idea the second he got it because of his low tier position in the company? Sure. People have implied or just straight up said that his race has played a part in not only him being pushed out of this, but people trying to contradict the story, and that is entirely possible. Nobody's denying there was another team working on Flamin' Hot Cheetos before Montagnier's story could possibly have taken place. But this whole thing of the wires crossing and the two, products happening at the same time, it could have happened. Honestly, the only thing this tells me is that Frito-Lay seems to have really shit record keeping. And while it's super unlikely that this, rich corporate businessman, a motivational speaker, is angrily trawling through YouTube going like, oh, I'm going to get them now. So I don't really think I'm going to be sued for making this video. But just to be clear, while I strongly believe that Richard Montagnier was a very successful businessman and now motivational speaker, let me sing you the song of my people. While I strongly believe that Richard Montagnier had a very impressive career and really climbed up that ladder in a way that, isn't possible usually for people who start off in his position, he also seems to give a lot back to his community and tries to reach out to them and tries to motivate them to be better for themselves and to not lose that confidence that they can gain up that said ladder. It seems unlikely from what I've seen that he was the one who invented the Flamin' Hot Cheeto. I might be wrong. Be nicer if I was. But I've linked the article and the tweets and all the other stuff below. Look into this yourself and draw your own conclusions. So based on the idea that this biopic might be entirely bullshit, let's look into what it says about biopics that are built on certain amounts of bullshit. I made a video last year going over my thoughts on biopics. FYI, if you can actually hear what I'm saying in that video, you should donate yours to science. I came away with the conclusion that we should be more open to the idea that biopics are just going to make shit up, as long as they don't do something like, potentially libel real ass people. It's more important to have a vision of, what you want to tell with this real life figure. I laid out 3 ground rules. The person has to be real, the story has to specifically be about them and not the story surrounding them, and it has to take place within a real life time period. What happens within that time period is incidental to the story. So consider this a kind of follow-up, because I never really considered a more moral grey area in terms of what can be said about depicting these real life people's lives. And that is, what if this film is trying to frame someone in a way that benefits others or themselves if they are still alive? What I mean is they may have motivation to frame the story in a way that kind of fudges details, not so much because it tells the story better, but because it benefits them overall personally. And we all know movies are made with some purpose, to make money, but also there are certain story purposes. And that can lead to altering someone's story in a way that makes them look good at the detriment of authenticity. And also basically in a way that makes their story not seem as compelling or as interesting than if they just stuck to the facts. Like, all stories manipulate you in some way, but what about stories that manipulate you in a way that benefits someone's ulterior motives? Depending on who they are, it can be pretty dicey. Let's look at Green Book, for example. Now, this whole thing has Oscar bait written all over it. However, it does feel like Nick Vallelonga, the story's co-writer and producer, wanted to make the story in a way that kind of makes his father look very compelling, who was the actor and bodyguard Tony Lip. Which is sweet, wanting to honour your father that way, and also builds up his own profile as somebody who had some moderate success, but wasn't a hugely prolific name in the business at the time, going off his much better known father and his unusual working relationship with the jazz musician Don Shirley. And hell, if he can make the story about how his dad overcame his own prejudices while working with Shirley, that, kind of benefits him in the long run, then bonus. The problem here is how little of Don Shirley's story seems to get a lot of focus, and this is something his family brought up. It's mostly about Babylonia. And Shirley's family spoke out against this white savior framing of this man who, albeit the racist, dragoned himself into a friendship with this man. They also questioned whether or not Shirley and Babylonia were friends, considering Shirley fired him. And there's no way of confirming or denying this. Both men died in 2013. What is interesting that if you watch the postscript of the film where they talk about they had remained friends for all their lives, they can't seem to find a photo of the two of them together. And again, telling the story of just about a guy who worked with another guy across the country is nowhere near as compelling. So you could see the benefits of the story of putting it that way, but also, you know, the kind of feel-good stuff that they're pushing here makes Nick Babylonia look a bit more kind of favourable in the Hollywood sphere, and, you know, it worked. He got Best Picture out of this. But this is extrapolation. I don't know Babylonia's motives. I don't know what was in his heart. But you know, a genre of film where the ulterior motives are fairly open-hearted?
God's not dead, he's surely alive.
I mean, I'm presuming this won't cause too much controversy because the 3 people who have made it to this point in the video probably don't really give a shit about religion. If I say that, one of the only times I've ever gotten a non-spam comment on my blog was when I made a critique of a religious film and this person basically just come down on me for not being pious enough. So I don't know, maybe they'll sniff me out. And there actually is a really strong case study for what I'm discussing here that's out in cinemas at the moment. The movie's called Sound of Freedom. And without going into too much detail, there is a reason why the most normal man alive, Jim Caviezel, is involved in this. Honestly, it's a much better case of distorting the truth or telling half-truths to get across an ulterior motivation than some guy who made up some story from 30-something years ago about creating a snack in order to make himself look better. Potentially, maybe, I don't know. But I haven't seen it. And I'm not waiting for it to come out here to see it, to talk about in this video. So let's talk about Jesus Revolution. It is possible that Jesus Revolution is better than Sound of Freedom. For what I can gather, it doesn't stray that far away from the truth. The story is based on a real life phenomenon in the late 60s and early 70s of basically a post-hippie movement of people who converted to Jesus and to religion. They were, you know, rather possibly cruelly, I don't know how you read it, called Jesus freaks. The hippie movement was slowly fading at this point. I think it was a way for them to basically get you know, this kind of salvation that they were looking for in that movement that they didn't find, but they found in, you know, spirituality and religion and stuff like that. This revolution was not televised, but it did get a bomb-ass cover. I mean, it possibly was televised, I haven't really looked into it. The film focuses on the conversion of later evangelical Greg Laurie, who also co-wrote the film. He finds God with the help of charismatic evangelical hippie Lonnie Frisbee and pastor Chuck Smith. And this shows the foundation of the movement at Smith's church, the Calvary Chapel. So usually when I watch movies based on true stories, my bullshit alarm goes off pretty fast. And oh boy, a quick Google brings up some interesting stuff about Frisbee and Smith in particular. The movie depicts Frisbee's fate-healing theatrics as causing a rift between him and Smith, and eventually Frisbee decides to leave the church as well as the movie. There is an afterword that says that Smith and Frisbee made up and he joined again until he left the movement afterwards. Well, they don't mention that Lonnie Frisbee was gay but massively in denial, and this was more or less an open secret. After his death in 1993, Chuck Smith gave a eulogy where he condemned his dead friend for giving into his temptations. Chuck Smith seems pretty groovy. Dude was a doomsday prophet. He predicted the world would end in 1981, and also he blamed 9/11 on America accepting the gays Fred Felt style, as well as abortion. And look, none of this is stuff that the movie needs to go into to tell its story. For one thing, most of it happened decades afterwards. But this tunnel vision does bring into question Smith's whole characterization. He starts off as a cantankerous silent generation traditionalist, and it looks like the story is more going for him slowly seeing Frisbee's worth and trying to basically come around to this and eventually coming to accept and really revere what he brings to it. You know, something called a character arc. Nope, that doesn't happen. The second he meets Frisbee, his contempt is more changed to, I have to reach the youth of today, and he basically gets depicted as a saint pun. And this could be because of Laurie's influence. After all, he is the co-writer of the script and Smith was his mentor. But I don't know, I think your power of religion message is definitely better reached out to people if you feel the calling that shagging quickly. Even religious films made with some level of integrity can't escape the inescapable pull framing. So I guess we're at a crossroads here. Is making a movie with these ulterior motives of, you know, making your dad look good and hoping that good grace kind of falls on you, you know, doing something to make your religion look a lot more appealing, or potentially trying to make yourself look good as you market yourself as the creator of a snack that you may not have actually created, does that affect biopics in a negative way? Is the potential of misleading people here a negative thing overall? And the answer is, I don't know. Because again, you should go into biopics knowing that some of this is bullshit. Zeroing in on Flaming Hot again, it is impossible to escape the fact that all of Richard Montañez's branding, all of it, is not based on the fact that he was the creator of Flamin' Hot popcorn and Sabricitas. Flamin' Hot Cheetos were a meme. They were the things getting banned from schools in very highly publicized stories. They are, and I hate myself for saying this, his meal ticket. I mean, I say that, but until recently, he had a pretty high-level market position in one of the biggest snack companies in North America. However, he has a massive social media presence, has 2 memoirs out, and also goes on a lot of public speaking events where his fee can go up to 30 grand. All of this is on the story. Now, he has a pretty successful film backing up his claims. And so I say to this, in terms of the guy living up large on this story, is, again, allegedly, if it's made up, hurting anyone, or is he exploiting anyone? Aside from the fact that the employee-employer relationship is inherently exploitative by its nature, okay, we get it, Trotsky, you're very smart. Most of the team who invented Flamin' Hot Cheetos appear to be retired or doesn't seem to be interested in claiming up this fame. Like, most of them just seem to want to set the record straight. He's doing expensive talks, sure, but the fee seems to be put up by the corporations who get him in to make these talks. And honestly, I don't give a shit if they're spending money on this guy potentially lying. Dude has an inspirational story. He was a high school dropout from a low-income immigrant family and went on to, take this high-ranking position. And I mean, poverty rates aren't as bad for Hispanic families compared to the 80s and 90s, but it's still at 15% as of 2021. And they hit 25% around 2010 when Montañez started speaking up about the story. 1/4 of Hispanic American families were below the poverty line. And let's be fair, these figures are probably smudged and not very accurate, don't take into account a lot of things about income inequality, la-di-da. We get it again, Trotsky. You're very clever, you're very good, here's a skunk. And I don't know, man, if somebody got inspired by some charismatic dude who actually made it, who was in their situation and rose up, who am I to shit on them trying to find some confidence in this world while they make it in their jobs, just because he told some tall tales. And are they all going to be rich? No, of course not. Most of them are not going to leave the income bracket that Montañez managed to do. But that's not on him. That's on our old friend Mr. Capitalism. It needs these people to stay at the bottom, blinded by the hopes that they can reach the top. The pull yourself up by your bootstraps rhetoric is built by artificiality and the very few who made it. But they permeate the American dream narrative that a lot of these people have just basically built their personalities around. And if you want to go into the negativities of that, well, maybe you should. But can we inspire people to do great things about themselves based on a lie? And that's storytelling. Even in biopics, where I said in my previous video that it's okay to smudge these certain mistruths and these details if it's in the service of a better story. I just feel like that this can be pushed on the foundations that certain people, sell this idea for their own personal valor or religious piety. They're looking to sell you something. And what happens when you're suckered in by the feel-good story and it turns out to be a load of crap and you feel not so good about following it all this way? And I don't know, this isn't an open or shut case, nor did I ever really intend for it to be. People are complicated and multifaceted. Sometimes they want to sell you on something rather than let you just be entertained by it. But if you want to take away anything from this, I think you should just be wary about the truths that these films sell to you, especially if they say based on a true story. Sometimes narratives are bullshit. That doesn't stop the film from being entertaining. I just wouldn't buy too deeply into the lore of somebody selling you a true story to bolster somebody with their propagandistic sway or trying to just boost their own cred. And hell, sometimes the story really is real life great and inspiring. It just needs a little flavor. Yeah, that's how I end it. Of course, well, I'm the one who can call somebody else a fucking hack then.